So today I somehow randomly got recommended this video about Helen Keller's story doesn't add up. Now, if you guys aren't familiar, there is a conspiracy theory, and this theory has actually existed for a lot longer than people think it has. I don't know a ton of details about it, but I know that Helen Keller has always been kind of like questioned, right? And I want to make this very clear. Helen Keller was, from all intents and purposes, 100% real. There is no reason to question the existence and accomplishments of Helen Keller, right? And there is one single controversy that, but we'll talk about that at the end as kind of like a little treat. But yeah, I think like the best argument against just like this kind of conspiracy is just the importance that Helen Keller has on the influence of like just blind and deafblind politics in general. So just a disclaimer, I'm not visually impaired beyond just having some nearsightedness. I do have some mild hearing loss, but not enough to be like considered like, you know, hearing impaired. So like Helen Keller is not necessarily a person who directly, you know, addresses my like existence as a disabled person, but she and just like the history of like blind independence in general has been very interesting and inspiring to me as a schizophrenic person, because schizophrenics don't really have an equivalent of that movement, right? And you can clearly see like the American Federation of the Blind has a massive archive. Actually, let me open it up. Give me a second. The American Federation for the Blind has a massive archive of basically every document relating to Helen Keller in existence that we know about, right? It's just everything they know about. It's kind of unfortunate that, you know, the OCR is not really super accurate, so blind people may struggle to read some of the documents provided, but it is a massive archive. It's a ton of work. But yeah, pretty much anything you would want to know about Helen Keller, you can find out here, right? This, in my opinion, I think that any historical resource that you read about Helen Keller, just because there's such a massive archive on her work, should be corroborated with this archive. Oh wait, that's just the About section. So they have letters between Twain and Keller here, for example. So you can read literally every letter that she had with Twain. So there's essentially what I'm trying to get at here is that there's essentially no excuse to, you know, basically present misinformation about this subject, like, at all. Like, it's so comprehensively researched and, well, not necessarily researched, but, like, just archived in general, and just so many resources at your disposal to demonstrate and prove that this is basically just a lie, right? And I think it's very interesting that he, you know, pushes this narrative that it's all grift, right? Considering that this is literally the purpose of his entire channel. Like, this is all fucking grift shit. And also super racist. So, obviously, I'm not really interested in just necessarily reviewing the video, because it's just going to piss me off from just being incorrect. But what I found a lot more interesting was he posted his sources. And this document here, which I will include in the description, is the original source document. But I would like to use this as an example of just, like, how, like, to better understand sources, right? So just for this discussion, I'm literally just going to be looking over the biography and reviewing what sources that he provided. Now, again, a disclaimer, I am not like a crazily, like super well-researched Helen Keller scholar, right? My specialty is in, you know, Felix Guattari, obviously, but I do know enough about Helen Keller to kind of navigate, you know, just the discourse, right? So what we got here? So he starts off with asking if Helen Keller is a fraud, knocking historical figures off their pedestals. I mean, if you want a reason to knock Helen Keller off her pedestal, the quickest one is just the fact that she was a supporter of eugenics, very openly. And she literally has a letter, I don't remember where it is, but she literally has a letter where she's like, you know, essentially celebrating the death of a mentally disabled baby because she believes that the elimination of disability like necessitates like eugenics. And that was a very popular opinion at the time, but it is very disturbing to read those letters. So if you really want a reason to not like Helen Keller, I think that would be the one I would go to. Like, it's genuinely, like, reading those letters is genuinely very difficult, because she's just so callous about it. But yeah, outdated beliefs. You can pick any hero and someone there is with a takedown video, but this one's different. It isn't about whether or not she was a bad person, but whether or not her accomplishments were even real. Now, the reason why I decided to actually go ahead and, like, discuss this is because the amount of violence that sighted people have historically had against the blind is actually just so difficult to fathom, right? Unless you are blind yourself, or you have one reason or another as a sighted person to be invested in blind politics, right? I got into it through a bunch of weird circumstances. I dated a blind guy like 10 years ago. He's a real prick, honestly, but like, just, you know, learning about this whole different way that people experience the world, and like just realizing like, holy crap, like that's something I just totally took for granted, you know. It's just something that I think sighted people don't really think about consciously unless they are like indirect contact with a blind person. And even then, you're completely unaware of the history. Like, I actually didn't learn until pretty recently about the history of Braille and how Braille was actively suppressed by sighted people, because sighted people wanted to have control over blind people. They wanted blind people to be unable to write, which is why they had this like complicated touch reading format, right? But what Braille produced was something that would allow blind people to read and write, and it was created in a way that was intuitive to what blind people found useful. And how did sighted people react? They literally tried to burn all of Braille's books. Like, Braille almost got erased from history because of this shit. So yeah, this kind of perpetuation of this kind of violence is just completely unacceptable. And it all just comes down to sighted people believing that blind people are completely incompetent, especially without understanding or even bothering to understand anything about blindness. And there's no way this guy understands anything about blindness when he's busy worrying about, does Israel control America? Like, go fuck yourself. But anyways, the skeptics might have a point. The legend of Helen Keller and the miracle worker of Anne Sullivan, whose words were really published. So it sounds like what he's trying to suggest is that like Helen Keller was having something called facilitated communication through Anne Sullivan, which is just absurd, right? So for those who don't understand, right, and I cannot begin to explain how fucking ableist this is until like you just listen. Okay, so facilitated communication is this controversial like idea, and I've heard both sides of the story. I do not really know where I honestly sit on this, because autistic people tell me very different things, you know, based on their position on it. But basically, it's a form of communication that is used for non-verbal people, right? And it's very important to say non-verbal, not deaf, not hearing impaired, non-verbal, right? Deaf, hearing impaired people, right? They create language. An example is how in Nicaragua, a bunch of deaf kids spontaneously produced a sign language, right? In fact, the sign language is significantly important for linguistic studies. It's like one of the most important fucking developments, because a language literally spontaneously evolved, right? So deaf people are not non-verbal, right? They form a means to communicate, right? Non-verbal people, for example, which can be like autistic or maybe like severely schizophrenic or whatever, usually mental impact, right? They do not synthesize language. They are truly non-verbal. They do not try to sign. They do not try to, you know, create like an actual syntax. They might have like something akin to what you might see with an animal, right, where they might like yell in reaction to something, but they typically, in most cases, they do not synthesize like what we would consider like a grammar or a language, right? And so like to argue that a blind person is being like is using facilitated communication to communicate is absolutely fucking absurdly offensive on so many levels. It's like saying a blind person is incapable of speech or thinking. And that's not to say that people who are nonverbal are somehow like inferior humans or anything, but it's more to say that, you know, it's deeply offensive when you don't even bother to understand the nature of the disability that you're attempting to call somebody a fraud over, right? You don't even attempt to understand anything about it. So basically he goes over some basic history about Helen Keller. So like what you need to know is that Helen Keller got her illness when she was about 18 months old, right? And a few years later in her life, somebody named Anne Sullivan entered her life. She was a teacher who helped kind of like discipline her to have like a sense of independence, right? And so what I think this person is going to argue is that Anne Sullivan is using facilitated communication with Helen Keller to like fabricate this like whole thing or whatever, right? So basically he acts like Anne Sullivan shows up and then all of a sudden she becomes this magical person who can do all these things, right? And it's like, well, yeah, if you believe in somebody and you actually like, you know, show them some things, right? Now, something that's really important to know about Anne Sullivan, right, is that Anne Sullivan was not just some random person, right? Anne Sullivan was a 20-year-old graduate of the Perkins School for the Blind. Compared with Helen, Anne couldn't blah, blah, blah. She had different upbringing. She was from poor. She entered Perkins at 14 years of age after 4 horrific years at a ward of the state at Tewksbury Alms House in Massachusetts. She was just 14 years old. She was just 14 years older than her pupil Helen, and she too suffered from serious vision problems. Anne was visually impaired. She was almost blind. She was almost totally blind herself. I don't know what her condition was, but she was fucking blind. It was a blind person teaching another blind person how to be independent. Anne underwent many botched operations at a young age before her sight was partially restored, right? Anne's success with Helen remains an extraordinary and remarkable story and is best known to people because of the film The Miracle Worker. The film correctly depicted Helen as an unruly, spoiled, but very bright child who tyrannized the household with her temper tantrums. Anne believed that the key to reaching Helen was obedience and discipline, but love, blah, blah, okay. Alright, so and I'll go over the next part in a minute, but, like, basically, Anne Sullivan was an older, like, you know, 20-year-old blind person who was teaching a young child who was more significantly impaired than Anne was on how to live as a blind person. Okay? And the thing that's so frustrating is that this is literally on the baby ass fucking biography page. This is like literally baby ass level research. I'm sure it's on Wikipedia too. Well, so basically he's going on about all of her accomplishments and stuff. It all stemmed from her life story and her extraordinary writing. By age 10, her letters became remarkably sophisticated. She began using flowery, somewhat Victorian language that was very adult-like. So, like, okay, I love how they're using Flickr. Okay, alright. Let's see. Okay, this probably is legit just based on the citations. So we'll just treat it like that. It says, Helen Wright, Anna George, will give Helen Apple Simpson, will shoot Bird Jack, will give Helen Stick of Candy Doctor, will give Mildred Medicine Mother,
give orange, me give eat orange, me eat orange, give me eat orange, give me give eat orange, me.
This just kind of seems like I don't understand what he's talking about. Like, it looks like a writing exercise. It doesn't even look like it's really, like, he's trying to argue that this is facilitated communication, but this is just the kind of stuff that they'll make you know, any child do. It's just, you know, oriented towards her disability. She's probably being instructed how to write each letter. That I don't see what? That genuinely what? In a poem she wrote at 13, she describes the golds, scarlets, and purples of an autumn landscape. I think he's telling more on himself that he's impressed by this. Like, am I just, like, losing my mind? I was writing like that when I was, like, 12, 13. That's not particularly unusual. I think this guy's just telling on himself. I mean, he is, like, worried about, does Israel control America? So maybe that's kind of, he is kind of telling on himself. But, like, she described lilac, her teacher's favorite color, as making her think of faces that she had loved and kissed. Right? Oh, I see what he's saying. Okay. He's all worked up about the colors. I see. Oh my god. Okay. This is him telling on himself that he's never fucking interacted with blind people. So, when I was about 10 years ago, I actually dated a blind guy, like I said. And he had a disorder. It was called Leber's congenital amaurosis. And it's a range of genetic disorders that basically causes the retina to not develop properly, along with a series of other, you know, issues, right? And you're basically born anywhere between completely blind to light perceptive. Like, you basically just don't have functional vision, right? And he never experienced color. Not even like having an infection early in life. He literally has never experienced color, right? And what he told me, right, was that to him, color, he kind of has to find something else to relate color to. And it makes sense, because if you think about what red is, right? Red is the junction of not just the wavelength of red, but also all of these sort of symbolic representations that we have with red. So, for example, things like fire and anger and heat and all these other kind of symbolic representations. To what he was explaining was that basically he just doesn't have the wavelength part of that junction. You know, he doesn't relate to the thing that actually materially grounds red as a color. He has red grounded from all of these other sort of representations that just naturally bubble up through, you know, kind of like, you know, what you know, just how people use red as a representative color, right? And this person's being all worked up about that, right? Now, I don't know the full extent of Helen Keller's visual impairment. She may have been light perceptive. She may have had some vision. I mean, the thing is that even if you have some vision where you're able to see, like, the color of a sunset, and many blind people can see the color of a sunset, like, you know, it's not like your vision is just pure black. Like, a lot of blind people just can't make out things in their vision. It's just very blurry, or it's like a muddy, milky mess, right? But they can still maybe see the color of something, right? In fact, total, like, complete vision loss is actually, like, I wouldn't say it's rare, but I would say it's a lot less common than sighted people think it is. Like, so just, like, again, I don't know on the top of my head the extent of her visual impairment, but considering that it was caused by an infection, it's entirely believable that she may have still had some ability to perceive color. So it's not like, it's not really like writing that off. And she could have just, again, been using color as a metaphor, which is, like, really not that weird. Like, again, I guess he's just telling on himself when he says this. Like, he's just telling on himself that I play video games and I don't understand what Metal Gear Solid is about. So, when critics challenge the visual language, color, respond, blah, 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 that's a sharp angle, but it's important because very little about Helen Keller's story can be independently verified. What are you fucking talking about? Are you gonna argue that every single fucking document in this archive is fake? Are you gonna argue that, like, oh my god, how many documents are in here? I would say thousands, probably. I mean, I'm just gonna look at this one sub-series. Okay, look at this. You're telling me that we don't know fucking shit about Helen Keller, and yet they have all of these archives? What are you fucking talking about? Look at this. Look at this. Look at all of this. Oh my god, there's so much fucking details. Like, look, we have her birthplace, we have her death, we have her investments, we have legal, we have so much shit on her. Holy crap. Oh my god. Okay, so, like, we have this, right? So we have this record of her baptism, right? And we have where the rites are. We have, let me see, we have the holding institution. We have the contact information. Yeah, tell me more about how we can't fucking independently verify anything. You can literally just contact them. You can go and contact your fucking pussy ass, your pussy gamer ass, and actually verify independently this document as existing. And you can do that for the thousands of other fucking documents that they have on Helen Keller. This is not hard. This is not hard. You can be, if you want to be a fucking researcher, you want to be a Google debunker, as what the fucking Minuteman says, you can do a little bit more fucking work, pussy. Alright. So before that, let's look at we don't know much about Helen Keller's condition. The official position from the Perkins School of the Blind is became totally deaf and blind at 19 months old, but no surviving. I mean, like, no one can confirm whether any residual function remained. Diagnostic tools available couldn't detect minimal vision. Well, it doesn't fucking matter, because, like, that's not how blindness works. Blindness isn't based on whether or not you have a little bit of vision left. Like, seriously, give yourself a little fucking pinhole and navigate without a cane. You can't do it. You wouldn't even be able to navigate with a cane, because that requires a lot of, teaching. But, like, you would literally not be able to navigate with a tiny little pinhole of light. Now, try navigating with only your peripheral vision. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that. Now do it with milky vision, with little black spots in it. There's so many examples of why the way that this guy is approaching his analysis is wrong, right? So, like, yeah, okay, the Perkins School of the Blind says that she was totally blind, and there may be a possibility that maybe she was light perceptive, maybe she was this, maybe she was that. Doesn't fucking change the fact that she needed Braille and a goddamn fucking, cane and all this other shit in order to get by. It doesn't change the fact that she needed to use, the finger communication. I don't remember what it's called. And that is not facilitated communication. It is a form of sign language, you fucking moron. And it matters because even a small amount of residual function is a big deal, because even minimal audio input gives the brain something to organize around. With none, the brain needs to build something from scratch. Okay, so this guy's telling on himself that he doesn't fucking understand how blindness works again for the upteenth time, right? So when you go blind, or deaf for that matter, at birth, right? It works differently than if you go blind later in your life, and it happens differently at different stages of your life, right? So Keller was 18, 19 months old, right, when she went deaf and blind, right? That means that she had 18 and 19 months to organize her, language development, which even if she wasn't speaking by the time that she went totally blind and deaf, would have still had a significant amount of development and shaping of her understanding of these things. She would have had plenty of visual development. By 6 months, babies definitely have enough visual development to, start shaping their brain. Like, you want to go and talk about shaping their brain, right? Why don't you look up what Charles Bonnet syndrome is, you fuckhead, right? Charles Bonnet syndrome is a syndrome where blind people actually hallucinate after they lose their vision for a while, right? Now, not every blind person has this, but some blind people hallucinate, right? And they hallucinate gaps in their vision. Their brain is spontaneously producing what they think should be there. Like, your brain is basically like a predictive machine, right? So it's trying to predict what it thinks should be there based on limited stimulus, right? So if she was totally blind, first off, there's a total possibility that she could still be receiving stimulus from her eyes, right? So that alone is going to, even if it's not like she's not seeing, she could still have maybe flashes of light and stuff. Sometimes that kind of shit happens, right? But this whole argument that it can arrange the brain or whatever, again, first off, try navigating with a tiny pinhole of vision. You can't do it. Try understanding what somebody is saying when you're partially deaf. I can actually speak on this one. The reason why I found out that I was starting to lose my hearing was because when I visited Montreal, right, with my friend, I could not hear them. could not hear them in many scenarios, and it was very strange, right? And mind you, my hearing loss is very mild in comparison. Like, I'm not deaf, right? I want to make that very clear. I don't have deafness. I have hearing loss, right? And while my hearing loss hasn't been measured yet, and we don't know what might be causing it, it may even just be the fact that I listen to loud music. I mean, that's something that happened to a lot of us, you know, but, a lot of us my age, but yeah, like, just because I have very mild hearing loss and I can definitely hear what people are saying if I'm listening to it in a video or something, that doesn't mean that, like, it doesn't impact my perception, right? So I would imagine that if my hearing loss was so significant that I could basically only hear all the time, right? Yes, that's of course different than being completely deaf. Those are two different things, right? But it's still, like, the distinction this guy is trying to make is completely full of shit, basically. That's what I'm trying to say, right? Nothing in the records contradicts that Keller was totally deafblind, but we only have the judgments of doctors from a different era. So basically he's saying that he just doesn't believe the evidence that exists. He's just like, oh, facts? Well, I don't have to believe those. Alright, more Helen Keller. Oh god, what is this stupid shit? We have more sources. Who are these people? Okay, I've never heard of any of these people. We have more sources and scientific knowledge than ever, but we don't have hundreds of people deafblind from birth with her capabilities. That's not true. Like, this guy probably just did a Wikipedia search. Like, you only know celebrity. These are celebrities. These are, well, not like celebrities in, like, the classic sense, but these are basically, like, well-known disabled people that you probably found out about on Wikipedia. Like, let's actually click the link and see if they're from Wikipedia. That would be funny. Okay. One's not from Wikipedia. Okay. That's a blog. Okay, that's from Perkins. Oh, we already got our first Wikipedia article. Oh my god. But yeah, like, you're literally citing famous cases. Like, you didn't bother... You know that there's, like, a whole section of the R Blind Discord server that's dedicated to deaf-blind people? Like, you could learn how the average deafblind person is like, instead of reading a Wikipedia article written by people who aren't deafblind. It's not that hard. There's a consistent pattern of the earlier and more total the loss, the more modest the output. Oh my god. And I think that we've never seen anyone produce anything Keller's volume and sophistication from a comparable starting point. I mean, that's just simply not true. Like, you just don't read disabled people. You read Wikipedia and you think it's true. You probably watch an AI-generated short on YouTube and think, yeah, that's true. I'm gonna believe that. And so do your fucking followers and 1 million viewers. I hate all of you, by the way. I hate all of you. So there's been tens of thousands of people deafblind from a young age. Why are we only talking about a handful? Because you used Wikipedia to find them, you moron. Part of that is the answer could be the pool is smaller than it appears because many of those children have disability beyond sensory loss. The number of those who are deafblind with other... So he's just drawing lines in the sand because he's like, oh, well, that's kind of inconvenient that they have autism sometimes. Still, it's a hard thing to get past. Today, in first world countries, we have early screening, special education mandates, assistive technology, and dedicated deafblind programs, resources that Keller's era couldn't have imagined. I wonder if there was a person that had a name that started in H and ended in Ellen Keller that contributed towards that transition. I wonder if that person that had a name starting in H and ended in Ellen Keller had any role in that, because, you know, that and then Ellen Keller person, you know, was supposedly deafblind, and, you know, before, when she was deafblind, she didn't have those resources, and then after, then those resources existed. I just don't understand how those two could be connected. That leaves a problem with no comfortable answer. What? Sponsor. Of course you're sponsored. Okay, so this is the part where it gets really wacky. Either deafblind people can achieve high literacy with proper support, which, aka, we should interpret this as deafblind people cannot do anything without their hands being held. People who are disabled cannot show other disabled people how to exist. That just doesn't happen. Clearly, they need a non-disabled person, like, or the overly large can't, which in the case Keller's output requires an explanation beyond her disability. And again, he doesn't even bother to research what it's actually like. He doesn't like go and see what people are talking about with deafblindness. He just assumes this shit from a 3-second Wikipedia search. Like, what the fuck? Anyways, so it goes to Anne Sullivan, coined by Mark Twain as the miracle worker. She came from the Keller family with a Breer backstory. She had severe visual impairment of her own. Well, at least he acknowledges that. Abject poverty, blah, blah, blah. Sullivan was 20 years old when she showed up in Alabama to teach the 6-year-old. She's never met no formal training as a teacher of the deafblind. What are you talking about? It just says right here, Anne was a 20-year-old graduate of the Perkins School of the Blind. Compared with Helen, okay, she literally graduated from the School of the Blind. She has training on how to teach blind people. What are you talking about? She literally has formal training. Like, this guy's literally just lying. Helen Keller became her entire identity and livelihood from that day forward. From the beginning, Sullivan controlled Keller's education completely. What she learned, how she learned it, what ideas she was exposed to. When Sullivan married a Harvard-educated literary clinic, he moved in and started to edit Keller's work, sometimes heavily by his own admission. So Keller's sole interpreter was married to a man with some serious literary skill, and they all lived under the same... So basically, he thinks that all of this shit was fraudulent because there was a smart guy living under the roof. Hey, Future Felix here. I just wanted to make a small comment. I think something that I missed pointing out is that it's actually kind of interesting how parts of Keller are edited out by this man. And, you know, it's kind of sad how when, you know, people see this, they don't think like, oh, this deafblind person is having their work essentially adulterated by somebody else. They think, no, the whole thing must be fraudulent, and there is so much evidence that she was writing her own notes, and, like, she had the ability to write on her own. Like, she used, like, a little Braille type thingy that typed the Braille out. Like, I don't understand. Like, you know what Braille is, right? You played the Pokemon Ruby game, right? That's Braille. She became a committed socialist, suffragist, and co-founder of ACLU. She praised blah, 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 blah. The idea that this happened in a vacuum inside a household with a socialist literary critic editing her words doesn't make much sense. Actually, it makes a bunch of sense if you actually, you know, read her work, right? So, the socialist work that she wrote, give me a second, a series of essays on socialism, right? Now, if you read these essays, right, a very common theme in these essays is about, one, feminism and teaching women how to, like, prevent disabilities in their children, right? And you can imagine that as somebody who went deafblind at a young age because of a preventable infection, you know, she's very opinionated on that, right? And, you know, another part of it is talking about how industrialism mass produces disability, right? So in Helen Keller's view, like her model of understanding disability is that, okay, disability is bad. Disability is harming how people should be, right? And industrialism is mass producing disability on a huge scale through the unsanitary environments that, you know, babies are being raised in and they're going blind like Keller did, or, you know, they become disabled in the workplace and stuff like that. And I would actually say that Out of the Dark is a very important text, and I would recommend that, you know, if you're interested in socialist disability theory, you should read it, right? It is outdated, obviously. It's an over 110-year-old text. But I think Out of the Dark makes very clear why a blind person would be, you know, heavily involved in socialist politics. You know, you just seem to think that, like, a disabled person just can't participate in politics. That's kind of what this person is almost implying. Like a like a disabled person just wouldn't have a motivation. They need to have some sort of intelligent socialist person. And yes, this text was published after this person was married, but like, again, if you actually read this text, it's pretty obvious why she would be a socialist. Like, it's not like, it doesn't, no. How I Became a Socialist, she wrote that Sullivan handed her the first book on the subject, not because she was a socialist, but only because she liked the writing style, and that she wasn't. Keller's politics went further left than any of theirs. Maybe her convictions were genuinely her own. But here's the problem. Ooh, we can't verify much of Keller's thinking at all that didn't pass through Anne Sullivan first. That's not true, though. Let me see how she actually wrote these, because I'm pretty sure it wasn't transcribed all by her. Helen used a Braille typewriter to prepare her manuscripts and then copied them on a regular typewriter. Okay, alright. So, what this means is that we can probably... I wonder if the AFB archive actually has these texts in Braille. I'll probably be editing this part down a little bit. Okay. So, maybe her convictions were genuinely her own, but here's the problem. We can't verify much of Keller's thinking at all that didn't pass through Anne Sullivan first. So, this is just a lie. Like, this is just a bold-faced lie, right? So, if we actually read this here, right? So, this talks about, you know, it does explain that, you know, Anne did work with Helen in her education. So, like, when she went to Cambridge... when she went to the Cambridge School for Young Ladies to prepare for Radcliffe College, right? The achievement was as much of... she entered Radcliffe in the fall of 1990 and received a bachelor's arts degree cum laude in 1904, the first deafblind person to do so. The achievement was as much Anne's as it was Helen's. Anne's eyes suffered immensely from reading everything that she then signed in her pupil's hand. Anne continued to labor by her pupil's side until her death in 1936. So basically, what Anne would do is that Anne would, like, take visual information, right, that was not available in Braille, and she would hand sign, right? So remember what I said about hand signing, about how it's not facilitated communication, it's a language, right? She was communicating through hand signs, what Helen Keller needed to know, right? Now, this is very important, right? Helen used a Braille typewriter to prepare her manuscripts and then copied them onto a regular typewriter. So for those who don't understand how writing works, that means she wrote the fucking text. Clearly she can write, and it's really stupid because this person probably thinks that the reason why it's all facilitated is because of something like this, as opposed to, like, looking at her entire archive and actually understanding anything about how she functioned as an individual. Okay. Now, Keller infrequently communicated through others, could type, and did develop the ability to speak. Here's a bit of that. But for 33 years, every word Keller ever published went through Sullivan as the sole interpreter. No. She literally wrote the shit on a fucking typewriter. She did it herself. What are you fucking talking about? Sullivan admitted that she sometimes got an idea of what Keller was saying, but didn't always know the exact words. I mean, yeah, sometimes that happens in regular speech too. I don't understand. During the Sullivan and Macy years, Keller published 3 books in her 20s, Out of the Dark, a sustained work of socialist argument at age 33, and others. The writing across these 3 decades was literary, philosophically ambitious, and politically sharp. Then Sullivan died in 1936. She was replaced by Polly Thompson, who had no background in literature or politics. The output changed immediately. Hey, future Felix here again. If you actually look at the bibliography for Helen Keller, the perceived jump in her quality of literature is completely hallucinated. Like, you can clearly see that she has a major shift in her themes by the late 1920s, which is before Sullivan died. So what's the argument? I mean, does this person not realize that some people can have these like radical politics when they're younger and then they kind of like level out a bit? Especially someone like Helen Keller, who had some pretty backwards beliefs, you know, in a lot of ways that harmed like the deaf community and like schizophrenics and epileptics. Like, she had some pretty backwards beliefs, so I just don't really get why it's so surprising that she has a shift in her literature, and it's not even where they say it is. Like, they're literally just making shit up so that they can say this. It's so bad. I mean, a very plausible reason for her to just stop writing would just be that she was really upset that she lost her friend. Like, this was her ally through most of her life. And then she died in a really horrible way, and she died in her hands. Like, yeah, that would be a good reason for somebody to change their tone, their writing. I mean, you clearly see it in other authors. What makes her different? Let Us Have Faith at 60 was a at 60? Okay, that's quite a bit of a... The output changed immediately. Helen Keller's journal, published when Keller was 58, was thinner and more emotional. Yeah, it's because her friend fucking died. Let Us Have Faith at 60 was a collection of short inspirational essays with no political edge. Teacher, a tribute biography, took nearly 20, is considered her weakest book. Okay, well, I haven't read it, but, you know, like, is it really shocking that her output changed after her, like, very close friend died? Like, really? That's just kind of lacking in sympathy. That's so callous. The verbiage changed as well, from more Victorian prose with a biblical cadence towards words. You don't even know what any of those words mean. Shut up. That were more grounded, more emotionally direct. Some critics argue that John Macy was the biggest inspiration of the earlier years, and without him, then Sullivan, the writing becomes less literary and more authentically Helen Keller. I mean, yeah, it's possible. Like, I mean, another possibility is that they may have just been discussing these ideas more actively. I mean, you got, like, think about it this way. Like, imagine you have a group of 3 of your friends, right? And one of those people dies. The discussions and discourses are going to change, right? And that's going to change your output, right? If half of my friends died, you better believe that my fucking output would change. If my fucking closest friend died, my output would change very dramatically. Not only would I be... And it's so callous to be, like, pissed off at Helen Keller for being emotional after 2 years after her fucking, like, closest friend died. Like, what? Really? That's your evidence? What the fuck? Okay. Alright. Some find it remarkable that during Vietnam and the Civil Rights era, a woman with Keller's strong opinions stayed silent. I mean, that's not unusual for people who are older, especially on the left. They burn out. She probably prioritized her blind stuff. It's very common also for people, American leftists, to cool off over time. So she was probably, you know, like, oh, okay, there's organizations that are interested in working with the issues that I have. So, like, this is a guy who literally publishes crap like this. You should know that, like, a lot of these people, like, taper out and become more liberal over time. That's not, like, anything unusual. But she was in her late 70s at the time, so I think it's unfair to draw too much from that. Yeah, it's a completely different era. Like, she was political in the, 1910s? Out of the Dark was published in 1913. Why are you talking about shit that she published in, like, the 1960s or whatever? 1950s? Like, are you out of your mind? But the Thompson years are hard to explain away. The decline in ambition and sophistication doesn't track with any medical event. Yeah, you know what a medical event it does actually track with? It tracks with the death of your best friend. Yeah. It tracks with the loss of Sullivan and Macy. Yeah. Because that's what dying does to people. Like, holy crap. Do I have to seriously explain to you what death does to people? Sullivan's own biographer, Nella Brady, wrote that as long as Sullivan lived, a question remained as to how much what can be called Helen Keller was really Annie Sullivan. The question never got answered, and that brings us to the hardest part of this whole story. I actually think that that's not... I actually think that, like, okay. So one way to think about this, right? You can be completely literal and be a brainlet, like Mr. What's his name here? Ken LaCourte. Like, you can be a total brainlet like Ken LaCourte. Or you can think about this in a similar way to how Deleuze and Guattari, you know, view their collaboration, right? Now, I would say that, you know, the collaboration between Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller was even tighter, right? Way tighter, because, you know, there was such a strong interconnection between those. You could really consider them a singular unit, right, in a sense. But that doesn't... It's so demeaning to act like that one is programming the other. Like, if you just look at the example of Deleuze and Guattari, they're not programming each other. They are complementing each other. That's how a system works, right? So that's probably what Nella Brady meant by that statement. She didn't mean that, you know, Anne Sullivan was perpetrating this, like, huge scam or whatever. Like, that's not what they're saying. They're saying that they worked closely together and it was hard to figure out whose contributions were whose, because they were constantly bouncing off of each other. The same is true for Deleuze and Guattari. Like, some of those ideas are so closely interlinked that, like, it's actually hard to trace what parts are sourced from where. So, yeah. Anyways, whose words were they? I have an editor who writes many of these words. Every author does. You're not an author. Shut up. It's really impossible to know without understanding their process. The fundamental thoughts of hers or someone else. Like, when I read her letters, they gave me pause. Here's an excerpt when she turned 13 years old. Late in the afternoons, we stepped into a gondola and made the trip through the lagoons. The sun was setting, and we watched the changing effects of its soft, rosy light upon the towers and fair white palaces. When it was quite dark, the city was illuminated, and the fireworks began. The thousand of tiny electric lights were reflected in the water. It looked as if a shower of golden fish had been caught in an invisible net. It's reasonable to question whether any child could write like that. No. At 13? No. Plenty of 13-year-olds can write that like that. They just read books instead of playing video games like you, without massive guidance from someone else. That's just not true. Like, you just have no imagination. And, like, there's no reason why Helen Keller can't write like that, right? Like, it could, like, not only could it, you know, like, it's probably not Charles Bonnet syndrome, right? It's probably just that she has an overactive imagination, right? Like, she's just imagining what things would look like. And it's crazy, because it's like, I don't understand these people who are just like, oh, well, blind people can't possibly write like that. Like, yeah, they can. They can still produce things like this. It's crazy that people can believe that an AI can do this that literally has no interface with the real world, but, like, apparently a blind person doing it is just completely out of the water, right? Ooh, do they talk about the Frost King? Okay, the Frost King is actually, like, a really funny thing that does happen. But it's not what this guy has been arguing through the whole entire thing. It's a plagiarism thing, but it's kind of weird. So she gave a short story as a gift to Michael Anagos, the head of the Perkins School of the Blind and a massive booster of his star pupil. She called it The Frost King, where autumn leaves were painted by fairies. He liked it so much. Okay. So basically, the thing about the Frost King is that it's a weird case of plagiarism, right? So, like, and this has nothing to be very clear about the issue with the plagiarism surrounding the Frost King, which was what I was hinting at the beginning, right? It's nothing like what this guy has been trying to build up to this entire time. It has nothing to do with Anne Sullivan or anything like that, right? Basically, what happened was Helen Keller tried to publish a story that was very, very similar to something else that was published a while back, right? And it is unclear whether or not she intentionally plagiarized the story or if she just, like, didn't remember that she read it, which is actually a lot more common than, like, what people would like to admit. And so it's kind of you know, ambiguous whether or not it was plagiarized. But yeah, that's like the main like controversy surrounding like Helen Keller's authenticity of her work. She definitely wrote the plagiarized version of the Frost King. That's not debated. What is debated is whether or not that was intentionally plagiarized or if it was unintentionally plagiarized, right? So I'm gonna just here we go. I predicted it. I knew it. This asshole is trying to fucking compare finger signing to facilitated communication. In the 1990s, there was something called facilitated communication. It was seen as a breakthrough. Oh my lord. So yeah, basically he's trying to argue that Helen Keller was using facilitated communication, and then he ends it by bringing up the haunting essay that Helen Keller wrote about eugenics. So yeah, I hope this video actually educated people a little bit about Helen Keller. I will be linking the Helen Keller archive in the description, along with other resources, so that you can have a better understanding of what the real Helen Keller was like instead of this horrible, horrible fan fiction. So yeah, fuck you, Elephants in Room, Ken LaCourte. Fucking poser asshole.